here in a minute. I want to thank my good friend Sean Ryan over in Middle Tennessee, Nashville, Franklin area, and my buddy Legend for bringing this to my attention last year. None of this would have been possible without them. You know, we've been talking about waste, fraud, and abuse lately in the media, in the Doge Committee, with the chair lady standing here beside me, and I don't think there's any better example than funding terrorists, if you can imagine that. You know, these dadgum people can hate us for free, folks, and hope that's not an omen, but I think we're good. I was working on the bill at the end of 2023 that would address these concerns we had with the Afghanistan Central Bank. This got taken to Sean Ryan and Legend, and we figured out that we've got a lot bigger problems on our hand. Sean and Legend brought to our attention that at least $40 million per week, $40 million per week in taxpayer money is ending up in the hands of the Taliban, and then it's later being auctioned off. Cash is flown by charter jets into Afghanistan. It's auctioned off to the Taliban in order to exchange it for the Afghan currency. From there, the Taliban will get it to the NGOs who have to pay taxes on that money. The NGOs have to be approved by the Taliban, and every time the NGOs spend the money, the Taliban will take a cut. When the money is exchanged for the Afghan currency, the Taliban take a cut. The Taliban also determine who can receive foreign aid. Most of the time, these people are either Taliban or Al-Qaeda. These people are the sworn enemies that hate Christians and Jews and treat women like cattle. Why on earth are we allowing U.S. dollars to end up in their hands? Why this hasn't been brought to the floor yet is beyond me, and I hope we get to that. This has been going on since 2021. I raised the issue, as I said, in 2023. Can you imagine what we could have done with $40 million a week since then? People in eastern Tennessee and western Carolina were sleeping in tents after Hurricane Helene until President Trump came on the scene, and we let this money go to terrorists. Think of that. And I'm urging Speaker Johnson to bring this to the floor immediately and for the Senate to do the same. And I want to thank Senator Sheehy and Senator Tuberville and Senator Haggerty from my own state for sponsoring the Senate version of the legislation. And next I want to introduce my good friend, Chair Lady Marjorie Taylor Greene. Marjorie, thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank my colleague Tim Burchett from Tennessee for introducing this bill and bringing this important information out for the American people. We're also grateful to our colleagues here in the House who've co-sponsored this bill, and we're thankful to our Senate counterparts for also sponsoring this bill in the Senate. This is an outrage to the American people. The United States went into Afghanistan in 2001 after Afghanistan refused to hand over Osama bin Laden after the terror attack in 9/11. Since then, over 2,500 U.S. military members have been killed in Afghanistan. The Taliban is the current reigning government and has current control over Afghanistan. To find out that $40 million in cash payments per week are being delivered to the Taliban is an outrage that the American people will not tolerate, they will not stand for. 72% of Americans, that's across the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, fully support major spending cuts, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in our federal government. Americans work too hard for the money that they earn and pay too much taxes to be basically abused like this and to see their money go straight into the hands of terrorists. Not only is this cash money flooding in weekly, $40 million, it's also being used, funneled into NGOs. This money is being taxed. This money is used in the economy over there in Afghanistan, and the Taliban is receiving so much of it. So I thank Tim Burchett, my colleague, for introducing this bill. I urge our Speaker, Mike Johnson, to bring it to the floor for a vote. And I urge all of our colleagues to vote yes to pass this bill and stop this money being sent to terrorists, stop this money being sent to the Taliban. With that, I'd like to hand over and yield time to Andy Biggs from Arizona.
Governor Biggs.
Thank you. Thank you. In recent weeks, we've discovered, or the world has discovered anyway, what many of us standing here today have already known, that U.S. taxpayer dollars is being squandered, wasted, and sent around the world and given sometimes to the bad guys. 3.5 years ago, the world witnessed the Biden-Harris regime's disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, during which 13 of our courageous service members perished. Since that time, Afghanistan has been controlled by the Taliban. The DC cartel has sent billions of taxpayer dollars to the Afghanistan central bank, essentially funneling cash straight into the Taliban's pockets. It's abhorrent to think that our taxpayer dollars have been used to aid terrorists, but that's exactly what Joe Biden and his cronies allowed to occur. This nation has a $36 trillion plus dollar debt. And we have to rein in federal spending, and we certainly cannot continue funding terrorism abroad. President Trump and his administration have been working at breakneck speed to hold the government accountable to taxpayers and restore our sovereignty on the world stage, our primacy, America first. When America is strong, there is peace in the world. When America is weak, groups like the Taliban, terrorists like the Taliban, take over entire nations, and they use our money to get stronger. Congress must stand with the president and move to codify his policy priorities here. This common sense legislation by my friend Tim Burchett is a great step to restore fiscal sanity and prioritize America First policies in Congress. It's an honor to stand behind the great Congressman Tim Burchett as an original co-sponsor of this legislation, and I thank him for his leadership on the issue, plus my colleagues who are standing here today. I urge swift consideration and passage of this legislation by Congress so that it can be signed into law by President Trump. I say to my friend, the Speaker, Mike Johnson, let's get a move on. Let's get this stuff done. Let's get it done right now. It's my privilege now to yield time to my friend, my colleague from Arizona, Eli Crane. Take my pledge. All right, you got it.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for coming out today. I want to start by thanking Representative Tim Burchett and my good friend Sean Ryan for leading on this No Tax Dollars for Terrorists Act. It's ridiculous that we have to even be here and bring this up for a vote, but the entrenched warmonger establishment does not abide by common sense. Recently, we learned what many of us had already known, and that is that billions of American taxpayer dollars were being funneled to spread anti-American sentiment across the world and fund terrorism. Given our roughly $37 trillion of debt and $2 trillion annual deficit, the arrogance and greed and foolishness coming out of this town is absolutely astounding. On top of the billions of tax dollars shelled out to USAID, Representative Burchett, Sean Ryan, and others, including our friend Legend over here today, highlighted that the Biden State Department sent millions of your tax dollars to the Taliban. As someone who has served our nation overseas and fought to defend liberties and freedoms that we cherish, it's disgraceful that the Biden administration sent our resources to our enemies on the battlefield. People often say that the United States funds both sides of every conflict. Under the Biden administration, those assertions are absolutely true. Last Congress, Representative Burchett moved similar legislation through the House of Representatives by unanimous support, only to have Chuck Schumer refuse to bring the bill to the floor of the United States Senate. If that isn't betrayal, guys, I really don't know what is. Fortunately, the American people spoke loud and clear last November and rejected the modern-day Democrat Party. With Republican control of the House and the Senate and the executive, we have a unique opportunity to terminate this once and for all. I'm proud to be a part of this effort, and I look forward to getting this to President Trump's desk as soon as possible. Tim, who's up next? Me. I want to introduce my colleague from Colorado, Miss Lauren Boebert.
Good job, Eli. November 5th, President Trump received a mandate from the American people. He overwhelmingly won the Electoral College vote. He won the popular vote, the first time in 2 decades a Republican has done that. And the mandate is to cut waste, fraud. Really, it's theft, not just fraud, and abuse from the federal government, within the federal government, and to be good stewards of the tax dollars that come in. When we're over $36 trillion in debt, it is our responsibility to have oversight and accountability and to rein in this spending. Now today, I am proud to join my friend from Tennessee, Congressman Tim Burchett. If y'all didn't know, he's the 435th most powerful member of Congress. And I think this legislation is maybe even going to get him to rank a little bit higher. But we have got to get this to the floor for a vote. And as my friend, Mr. Burchett says, if our enemies can hate us for free. We don't have to pay them for them to hate us. They are a terrorist organization. And under Joe Biden's leadership, we surrendered to the Taliban. 13 brave service members were left behind, lost their lives. I called Joe Biden out on the House floor at the State of the Union address here in Congress, and I'll do it again. I will remind Joe Biden and his administration every day, if I have to, that he is responsible for the death of 13 of our service members. $7 billion worth of weapons and equipment were left behind during that botched, horrible embarrassment of a withdrawal from Afghanistan. And this withdrawal was a national embarrassment and a tragedy of the highest order, particularly for those families who continue to grieve the loss of their loved ones. And in addition to that, House Republicans uncovered that Secretary Blinken used taxpayer dollars to send weekly cash payments of around $400 million to the Afghanistan Central Bank. One of the best ways to protect the American people from these terrorists is to stop the flow of money that is going to them. And unfortunately, for the Taliban, there is a new sheriff in town. President Trump has promised to rebuild our military and stand up to our adversaries by keeping our armed forces strong and counter rising threats from terrorists, not continue to fund them. They can go fund themselves. Let's put this common sense bill that puts America first to the floor for a vote. I am proud to support it. And let's move the No Tax Dollars for Terrorists Act through the House and the Senate and to President Trump's desk that is hopefully now debugged from listening devices. And let's get it signed into law. Mr. Burchett, thank you.
And next, my dear friend Ralph Norman.
I want to thank Congressman Burchett for putting the No Tax Dollars for Terrorists Act. Isn't it amazing we're even having to consider this? Paying our enemies, that, like Lauren said, they'll hate us for free, and yet we're paying them. I'm glad to have my Israeli friends here. Anybody that saw the atrocity that took place back in October witnessed, you know, the raping of women, the slashing of throats, the killing of babies, the fires, people set afire. And to think that we're sending our money over there to fund them. And folks, one of the most important things, why cash? If you think about this, why cash? Why should we even give any credence to the numbers? With cash, you can't track it. So is it 10 billion? I have on my list 40 million, and then 10 million paid to the Taliban in taxes. But 40 million in cash? There's no other reason to do that other than to cover it up, get more money than they say, and make it untraceable. The great thing about what's happening in America today, America's getting a front row seat to abuse, to fraud, to the wasting of your tax dollars. We're getting a front row seat. But to pay our enemies, and as Eli said, and other members, Corey Mills, who's rescued people from stranded people that the Biden administration left behind, really speaks to how well Donald Trump has taken the reins and is making America great again. We are in the golden age, and it wouldn't have happened without 77 million people going to the polls and expressing their opinion. Enough is enough, folks. Enough is enough. And by Tim Burchett's bill, I hope it comes to the floor quickly, and I hope President Trump as I know he will do, he'll sign it. Thank y'all for coming. Tim, thank you for putting this up.
And I believe there's been a sheet distributed to y'all to break down the money, where it's going, and how it's done. It's pretty crafty, but it follows a pretty straightforward path. And we'll answer any questions y'all have.
Congressman, why is the money still going to the Taliban?
Well, that's a good question. It's going I believe, in the form of relief. We have a hard time turning our backs on folks that are struggling, and that's a good thing. But they're just taking it right off the top. You know, the Lord just takes 10% with our tithe. This bunch takes a whole lot more, and it's $40 million a week that we know of. President Trump put a number out that was substantially higher. It could be up to 140 million, but 40 million is the number, is the low end every week.
A special Inspector General's report came out recently that said the Taliban can't access these dollars if they're going to the Afghan people to help rebuild.
Yeah.
That under sanctions, they can't access them.
I guess he lives by the golden rule. Unfortunately, the Taliban does, and we have people on the ground that are within these organizations that are telling us that money is getting to them. If not, then no, I don't pay much attention to that.
Is that one of the ones that got fired?
Yeah, is that one of them that got fired? That's a good point. So I think what we're seeing is it's just a money laundering, a very arrogant case of money laundering of our hard-earned tax dollars. And money's fungible, brother. It's just like you pour water into a pitcher and shake it around, it's going to go to all areas of it, and that's exactly what this money does. And Ralph is exactly. Oh, I'm sorry, Bob. Ralph is exactly right. There's no way to trace it.
It's astonishing how the media will fight to defend our tax dollars that are going to these NGOs and the ridiculous amount of payments that are going out, and even to terrorists. To have media here that is questioning this and saying, oh, well, they really can't access it. What is being rebuilt in Afghanistan? I mean, do you see any glorious things happening there? Joe Biden couldn't even rebuild after hurricanes when we have American citizens who are suffering. I mean, we have folks after the fire, the Palisade fire, who are still suffering. And that's mainly because of red tape. And if it weren't for President Trump opening up the spigot, I don't know, may still be on fire. But we are doing everything that we can to be good stewards of the American tax dollar. And it's time we put America first. And when America is put first, then we can look at how to help our allies across the world and not continue to fund our adversaries. For anyone to defend any dollar that is going to a terrorist organization, shame on you. This is the mandate that President Trump got, that we are done sending our money for this. We don't need Sesame Street in Afghanistan to be funded by taxpayer dollars. We don't need tourism in Egypt. We don't need sex changes around the world to be funded. And we certainly don't need to hand $7 billion in the world's finest military equipment over to the Taliban and then continue to fund them on the low end $40 million a week. This is insanity, and it stops under President Trump. And I'm so grateful for the American people who showed up to put him rightfully back in the White House and give us the majority in Congress so we could finally do something about it.
Any other questions? Yes.
What about the funding aid to the Palestinian in the Gaza Strip?
Well, this doesn't address that. No. If they qualify as a terrorist organization, then in fact it would. But this is when they do that, when they cross that line, that's where it hits them. The bill's pretty specific. It's drawn out, so it's broad enough where it'll affect all the others if we think they're taking it as well. All right.
Thank you.
Are you with the press?
I'm with the press, sir, but I don't have the badge to get in.
See, why?
So I'm from Afghanistan, so that's why I have the question, sir. Do you allow me to ask this question? So there's two questions, sir. First, do you